The latest MCU Disney Plus show, Echo, has dropped on Disney Plus and Hulu last week, and so let me rank all 9 MCU Disney Plus shows from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Ethan, and I talk about a bunch of movies and TV shows on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share your ranking of all 9 MCU shows. And over on my channel, I have more rankings and content like this. Check those out once this video is over. And with all that said, let's just get straight into the ranking. Easily in last place for me is She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. And there's not really much to say here about this show being in the MCU that hasn't really already been said. Let's just face it, this is a stupid TV show and a massive waste of time in general. So, this show, from the title, Attorney at Law, considers a superhero is being a lawyer, and that's essentially what this is. There's no central plot to it. Every single episode is just a dumb court case. One of them involving like magic tricks, another one involving like copyright infringement, and all of it just doesn't work at all. And its attempts at being funny and being a comedy and having her try to be like Deadpool, looking at the camera, breaking the fourth wall and all that stuff, ends up coming off as cringy humor instead.
Smashes buildings, I smash fourth walls and bad endings. And sometimes Matt Murdock.
Right.
And there's so much of that throughout the show. And there's not really much humor, nothing really to latch on to here. And people only showed up to this show because Daredevil is in one episode. There's also just some really dumb sequences, including our lead character, She-Hulk, literally exiting her own show and going into Assembled, the making of S.H.I.E.L.D., to talk to a robot, Kevin Feige. And I'm not even exaggerating saying that. That's an actual thing that happens. She goes to the Disney Plus screen, like the screen on the streaming service, and literally walks into another show.
Hey, what do you think you're doing? All right, let's see here.
What the fuck is going on?
That's probably the dumbest thing in this entire franchise, and so this show just comes off as unwatchable, probably the worst thing that the MCU has ever put out. Number 8, Secret Invasion, and this was a real letdown. At its core, this show has a fantastic premise. It's kind of a paranoia thriller, while the Skrulls are forming a secret invasion on Earth, but all of this potential is just absolutely wasted for some goofy sequences, and it just goes absolutely nowhere for the most part. And a big part of that is every character, aside from Nick Fury, just isn't really memorable or gets enough time to be fleshed out as to why you should care whenever they show up on screen or anything like that. And so the show just comes out as kind of boring for the most part. And because the characters aren't really memorable and you don't really care about them, there's nobody really to latch onto or connect with for the most part. And so that's a major problem when it comes to a TV show, because when you're watching through 6 episodes, you want to watch the next episode to see what happens to the characters, and there's no character to latch onto with this show. And it all kind of leads up to this. It doesn't even reveal the villain plot until the second to last episode at the very end of the show. And it just seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere, therefore it feels kind of rushed. And the finale is just ludicrous and horrible, where you literally get Emilia Clarke and our main villain duking it out and fighting with every single Avengers superpower. And with just goofy looking CGI, it's a goofy looking sequence in general. And so, I guess it kind of has like a nice slick production with some okay performances, but this show just didn't work at all for me. Number 7 is our newest show, Echo, and I think the best thing about this show is that it's, I think, a little bit more darker than the rest of the MCU. It's not nearly as dark as the Marvel Netflix universe with Daredevil, but it is it is darker than the stuff we've gotten previously before, and inherently that makes it feel different from the rest of the franchise. Also, the characters, I think, felt like they have a long history with each other, where they've known each other for a long time. They know how they're going to react to things. They know what sets them off. And so, I thought those were the best elements of this show, but overall, I don't think this show really worked. The problem is that because our characters have such a long history, you're supposed to care about them, and I just didn't really care about any of the characters here. The main plot involves Echo returning back to her Native American roots and reuniting with her family who got swept up in this adventure, but I just didn't really care about any of that. Likewise, in this show, unlike Daredevil, I didn't feel like Kingpin felt like nearly as much of a threat in this show. And Daredevil barely appears in the show. They had a bunch of marketing for him in it, and he barely appeared in this show. And there's also some big cheats and lapses in logic when it comes to here. The obvious one for me is at the end of Hawkeye, Echo shoots Daredevil in the face, but then Daredevil's revealed to be alive because she only shot him in the eye. And immediately you go, wait, something's not right there. How is he not dead? And to me, the biggest problem with this one is that there was so much setup with the family, the backstory, the bloodline, and the powers that I don't think the ending really paid off nearly as well. It set up very little payoff, and I just thought that, like, by having superpowers enter into the mix, even though I thought this was kind of a grounded show with, it's more serious than a bunch of the MCU, and I don't know, it felt kind of lackluster by the end, where, like, I don't need everybody to have powers, where you literally have her and a couple of family members punching dudes with machine guns in the face. And so, by the end of it, it just comes off as kind of cheesy. And so, a show that, while I appreciate them trying to do something different, be more darker like the Netflix verse, this one overall it didn't do anything for me. Number 6 is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and to be clear, I think I go positive on this show and every other show on this list, and so there's not that big of a gap, but I do go positive on this one and every other one on the list, and I went negative on Echo and the ones below on this list. But when it comes to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when I first watched this show, I enjoyed it enough, and then I kind of soured on it, but I've grown to warm up to it a little bit. Now, certainly, this show is not nearly as good as it should be, considering our two lead characters, and having them follow up Avengers Endgame should be much better than it actually is. But I think there is a lot of chemistry between the two leads all throughout the show, but that doesn't make up for the fact that this is a very flawed TV show. And the biggest problem with it is I think it tries to make Carly Morgenthau, the villain, just a sympathetic person who has troubles of her own, and so it tries to make you relate to her. And I think because of that, there's no true villain and no true threat. Where, like, she is doing villainous things, but it tries to make you relate to her and make her an emotional character. Also, there's just some really bad attempts at some deep messaging that I just didn't think needed to be here. Still, there's some cool action here and there. Like I said, with our two leads, you do have a lot of banter and chemistry, and you even get some characters that I think are good, like bringing John Walker into the mix to change up the dynamic a little bit. But this one, while I enjoyed it more than I remembered, I don't think it worked fully as a whole. Number 5 is Miss Marvel, and this is a charming enough adventure to me that is carried by a fun lead actress playing a fun lead character. And so throughout the show, it just has this sense of innocence, charm, and energy, and most of that is Iman Vellani playing Miss Marvel, and especially her dynamic with her family and her dynamic with her friends is just a lot of fun for the first 2 episodes of the show. And so I was actually digging it quite a bit at that point in time, but when it gets into the whole adventure side and they're going to Pakistan trying to find relics and stuff like that, it just didn't really do it for me. And I know a bunch of you guys probably love this show, but this one just really wasn't for me. and I didn't really care too much about the adventure side. And then it goes to this whole other plotline with damage control and them trying to hunt down this new superhero. And those elements of the show, I didn't really care for them all that much. They didn't really work all that well for me. And since it is a more kiddish show, it's a high school. I am a high schooler, so just keep that in mind. So it is a high schooler interacting with her friends, being on an adventure with her friends for most of the show. But the adventure stuff, the damage control stuff, I just didn't really care about it. The plot's not really all that memorable. The characters, the specific side characters and villains aren't really that memorable. And so, a show that just isn't really for me. And so, it's fun, it's charming, but it wasn't for me. And then we have Moon Knight. This is a very interesting character exploration of our lead character, and I think he is portrayed really well by Oscar Isaac. He's just fascinating in the way he talks, the way he does things, and it gets very disorienting at times. In which case, because our two main characters are the same in the same body. Like, we got Mark Spector, you get Stephen Grant. And they're both such different people, one being a bit more serious than the other, and that leads into some very cool, trippy sequences throughout where you're put in the perspective of this guy, and you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's going on, and you don't know what is to come, as he's experiencing these things he doesn't know how to explain, and so that just makes for a very different show in the MCU that I thought was really interesting. I know a lot of you guys didn't like this show. Of course, I would say it slows down at times. It is a globe-trotting adventure just like Miss Marvel, but I found it more interesting than the globe-trotting adventure in Miss Marvel. But it does definitely slow at times. And likewise, the ending feels rushed, much like a bunch of these other MCU Disney Plus shows. But still, I feel like I like this show more than a bunch of other people do. In third place is WandaVision, and these next two, number 3 and number 2, I could probably switch around them any day of the week, but I think I'm confident in the placement that I'm putting these. But I think WandaVision is just one of the strangest MCU projects that is released, because it is a sitcom. For half of the show it is a sitcom, and for half of the show it is kind of a mystery, but that's not to say it's a criticism. I think it does this really, really well, as it does such a great job at keeping the audience guessing within every episode. Like, when this show first dropped on Disney Plus and they dropped it week to week, I couldn't wait for the next episode to drop each time I watched it, and it always just makes you want to watch more. It moves at the right pace. It has just enough mystery and cliffhangers at the end of every episode in order for you to want to check out the next one. It doesn't always pay off 100% of the time. Like, some of the twists, they probably could have been better. And likewise, Wanda's character arc in this show, with her being the villain and her getting a character arc in here, it's kind of undone if you've seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's making her arc in this show kind of pointless. But overall, an intriguing, entertaining show from beginning to end. Our runner-up is going to be Hawkeye, and this is very much a less ambitious, smaller scale show in the MCU, but I also think that's just what makes this show really good, is that it's not trying to be this big, gigantic show with massive world-ending consequences. It's just trying to be a fun, small-scale show, and I think it does that really well, and that's kind of the charm of that. A lot of that comes with our new additions of characters, especially Kate Bishop and Yelena, who I think not only have a great dynamic with each other, but of course Kate Bishop has a great dynamic with Clint, and Yelena is just really fun anytime that she shows up on screen. It also has several amounts of energy and charm when it comes to all the characters in it, and just enough humor in there to make it work, just enough Christmas cheer as well to make it work. And you get a compelling character story for Clint, as he's done a bunch of horrible things when he's wearing the Ronin suit in Endgame, and he's trying to right those wrongs. He's trying to leave that behind, but there are still enemies after him. Just an interesting, compelling character story, and I think of all the MCU shows, this is the one that most feels like a TV show. The one that feels like it has a consistent pace throughout it and makes you want to watch the next episode every time, week to week. And so I think that because it leaned into all the bag of tricks you could do with a TV show, as well as has a bunch of energy and all that stuff, I really enjoyed this show. But for me, easily coming in first place is Loki. And I believe the last time I did this ranking of the MCU shows, Loki was not at number 1. It was probably at like number 3 or something like that, below Hawkeye and WandaVision. But just a couple months ago, we got season 2 of this show, and I absolutely love this show now. And so let's start off with saying that it's just a really clever way to continue this character who was dead in Infinity War, and they found a clever way to bring him back and continue an even, possibly even more compelling story than the one he was given in the main Infinity Saga. You got this branched timeline where it follows this different version of Loki from Phase 1, and him telling, and it's telling a completely different story. That's just a clever spin on this character. Also, it's a very different world in the MCU. It's set in this place, the TVA, that literally controls timelines, controls what happens in the timelines apparently, and there's just some great characters and interactions. Of course, you have Loki and Lee, but you also get Owen Wilson as Mobius, who I think just has a great interactions with Loki, and you also get Sylvie, and even B-15 in Season 2, I think really improves with this one. And you also get Kiwi Kwan in the show as OB, really fun, and even Victor Timely is really fun. So all the characters are just really fun to be around, and you want to spend time with them. And this show has the proper setup and payoff. Like, apparently this show had no rewrites, and so they just had a plan, stuck with it, and I think it shows, as it just has such a really good finale, and it's very satisfying. It pays off stuff from previous MCU projects, while also paying off things that were set up from the very first episode of the show. And to top it all off, it just has some very fantastic production design. Like, for a TV show, this show just looks very believable, and some of these other shows have some noticeable CGI, but the production design just shows in this one. And so when you put it all together, you get an emotional show with characters you actually care about, great visuals, and it just keeps you intrigued, and it wants to make you watch more from beginning to end. And so for me, easily, Loki is the best MCU TV show. There you have it. That's my ranking of all 9 MCU TV shows. Down below in the comment section, share your ranking. Over on my channel, I have more content like this. Check those out right now. Click that like button and be sure to subscribe because it really does help a lot. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.